Hello, everybody. Here we are on this lovely Friday morning, sorry. I thought I'd just start recording and see where this video takes us. I've been thinking about, well, just a little while ago, I was thinking about how dangerous human beings really are, right? Like potentially. I've been reading about like history, right? Especially like the Freemasons and the discovery of America, and just kind of like how America, and I think I made a video about this before too, discovering America, and I talked about the slaves, and just how like all of that was able to, like let's just take the 13 colonies, as an example. What the hell were the 13 colonies? The 13 colonies were basically like a long beach, right? Like this side shore, like a shore, right? It was basically just a shore that came from England, right? Because they were pilgrims, they were Englishmen, right? That decided to live in the 13 colonies. They installed themselves in the 13 colonies. They established cities, right? They funded them and everything. And then, they turn out to be like the greatest superpower, the biggest superpower of the world. It's interesting, I think, to see how the United States, for example, has military bases in all like in like all over the world, right? And how they have, taken over, maybe not territorially, like and even territorially like that, having military bases is kind of like territorially, but in a more sophisticated way, where I think they're like fixing something outside the house. Sorry for the noise. But just the fact that they're able to influence the culture, like the world culture. Because if we look back at the Freemasons, the Freemasons had this idea of a new world order, right? They wanted to create a new world order. And the book I'm reading basically goes on to explain that maybe that was the intention of some Freemasons when they had this type of, what could we call it? Like dispute going on, territorial dispute of the Americas. Like when America was discovered, Spain discovered America, and Spain was the one that had the most territory in America, right? But England was also like the superpower at the time, right? It was the commerce central point, that island, the United Kingdom was, the British Isles were the superpower of the world, right? They had connections to India, to I think Australia and South Africa, maybe, or maybe that was more of the United States deal with South Africa. The thing is that, Spain wasn't able to do anything with the colonies that it had in America, whereas England, was able to give birth. We could say England is the father of the United States to a certain extent, right? Because the people, I mean, just the mere fact that they speak English, right? And yeah, like I was mentioning, it's interesting to see how like the whole world has been influenced by this kind of new world order that may have started in that era. Because I'm just at the point in the book where they're talking about like how the independence movements came about, right? Like these type of revolutions against the monarchy, and how the Freemasons, they were free thinkers, so they had a bunch of ideas. And that I think, like if you were to decide which is better, is it better to have order, which could be represented in tyranny, in monarchy, but at the same time in safety, right? In order and peace? Or would you rather have like this free thinking potential mentality, right? Like more left wing, but at the same time it's more chaotic, it doesn't have order, it doesn't have structure, right? Like I was looking at this, like what was the period after the Civil War in the United States called? And it was called the Reconstruction, right? Because after a war, I mean, like the highlight in history is always like the wars, right? Like this war happened, right? But nobody looks at what happens after, right? Where it's devastation, right? And you have to reconstruct literally things, right? Like in Germany, Japan, right? Great cultures, great nations that, even though they were hit hard by World War II, for example, they were still able to, come back and become like world economies. That's crazy, and there's this video that explains why, from what if alternate history, great YouTube channel. And he explains why there are some cultures like the Greek culture, the German culture, the Japanese culture, the Gypsies, the Jews, which are people that are very very hard to kill, right? Very strong-willed, and they're very resilient, right? Like they'll jump back from catastrophes, like no problem. Um, but then, like, we look at Latin America, for example, or just America as a whole, and it's kind of embarrassing. I have to say, to a certain extent. I mean, we do have the argument that as Americans of the continent America, we don't have the same history that, for example, Asian, Oriental, European, African cultures have, or Middle Eastern cultures have, right? Or Russian cultures. We have, we've only been around for like 400, 500 years. I mean, I know before that there were the natives, but the natives were always fighting, right? And that's kind of like the other thing I wanted to talk about. Like, why are we always fighting? What is the solution, for example, with with just like a bunch of things happening all over the world, with problems, with conflicts, with wars. One solution is the unification, of like, just, of people in power, just unite then, and make this a better place, kind of like the Taliban in Afghanistan, right? If you're gonna have so much power, well, just govern then. You're the one in power, because I think that's how they used to do it back in the day. People were sufficiently powerful or strong, right, to like take over territories, nations, whatever, and they got to take control of it, right? They got to control it, yeah, to make it theirs, to dominate it. So it's like, yeah, just do that, because I think a lot of the conflict has to do with egos, right? And maybe with past, like, things that happened, excuse me, like, for example, with like this problem with China and Taiwan, or Russia with Ukraine, and Russia with Crimea, right? Crimea or something like that, where it's like, we want our territory back. We want, like our nation's pride restored, right? Mexico, for example, we got taken states from us, right? Like, the United States took our states, California, Texas, parts of Arizona, yeah, like those southern western states, those were part of Mexico. But you don't see Mexico, like, fighting over that, or being like, hey, give us back our territory, you know. So, but you would have to put ego aside, right? That's kind of the thing. So it's like, could we live like in a world free of war? Like a genuinely peaceful place. Is that simply a utopia, or is that something that could actually be? Now, the other idea that I wanted to get to was the new world order, right? What would a one world order look like, right? Where, like, literally everyone was united, But I don't think that can happen, because, I mean, that's the intention, and that was the intention of the Freemasons back, like, what we're talking about, like, 400, 500 years ago, 600 years ago. But what would that even look like? I mean, right now, I think about, like, moving to some other country, right? I want to live in Germany, because I'm learning German, right? Ich habe eine Frage. But how is that possible? I could go and visit, but I gotta get out. I can't pack up and say I'm moving to Germany and I'm gonna live there, because you have to go through this, like tight bureaucratic, like, grinder, where like, it's gonna be really difficult and costly. Not to mention costly. You gotta pay. Basically, you gotta be rich. I think, to live like in another country. I've looked into like Japan, maybe like Canada, maybe even like South American countries. But yeah, it's like, how do you expect the world to become one where when we live in a world that doesn't even allow like for open immigration or open flow of people coming in and out of countries, right? Like like those borders are tight, like those border securities, the parameters, they're tight, and especially in what we would call like first world economies or first world countries. So what would a one world order look like, or a new world order really look like, nowadays, where you know you have these divisions, right? These like physical barriers where you can't, get past that, bureaucratic barriers, financial barriers. It's kind of like you're stuck where you are, and you can't really go out beyond that, and that's kind of frustrating, and maybe the Freemasons were idealists. They did think about utopian world where, under one world order, you could have like more peace, I guess, because like I said, what brings peace is unity, just joining people together. But yeah, I don't want to say they were delusional in thinking that, but I think we're far from that. We're really far from that. So yeah, as far as the Freemasons go, I'm not really sure. You know, the people like to speculate about the future and say, oh, this is gonna happen, or that's gonna happen, or and we can kind of see this with the United States and Russia, where we could say, well, the United States wants to monopolize the world, but Russia ain't having it, China ain't having it, right? So it's like, because the US did ally itself with European countries. So it's like the European Union and the United States, right? And Canada and whatever. But um, yeah, I think it's difficult to get to that. So and they people love to talk about like World War III or like something happening like that. I don't think anything historical is going to be happening in our lifetimes, really. I think people are just going to stay the same. Things are pretty much going to be, the same. I mean, think about this. Think about how much you change from the beginning of a decade to the end of a decade, right? Like, think about how you were at the beginning, like, let's say in the early 2000s, and then like towards 2009, 2010. And then think about how you were like in early 2010s, like 2011, 12, to how you were in 2019 to 2020, right? Like, you personally go through a lot of changes, but then think about the world, right? How has the world changed? It still has the same problems. It still has the same conflicts, the same wars, right? It's the same thing, right? Like worldwide. So yeah, I don't really think humans are really bad at talking, at negotiating. So I don't really think that's going to be something that can, transpire in the next couple of decades even. Who knows? I do think that if we all put our effort into it, we could achieve great things. But there's too much ego, there's too much triangulation and communication. There's a lot of miscommunication. There's a lot of misunderstanding, right? So yeah, it's kind of a pessimistic take, but we could be living differently. I mean, at least not objectively, or not towards the goal, right? We wouldn't have a different life, but the processes, the way in which we do things could be different, right? Could be more efficient, more effective, more open. The borders could be open, the channels of communication could be open, where people would just basically, like, I was listening to Jordan Peterson talk about this, where like you don't when you attack someone, right, when you criticize that person tends to close up. Like, if you say you're wrong, this is the correct way to do things. But if you just give an alternative, right? So it's just the way in which you do things. You're still going to achieve the same thing. You're going to get the people to change their mind. But instead of, attacking the person and saying you're wrong, this is right, you give them the alternative. You say, okay, I understand what you're doing. I understand your point of view, right? Like, I'm thinking of like North Korea or someone really, or Iran or someone like really set in their ways. You tell them, okay, I understand, but there's this other way, right? And you just show them that there's an alternative to living, right? And that should be enough for them to just like, you know, that should be enough for you to just plant the seed and for the seed to grow in them, right? Like there's this other way, right? So yeah, I don't know. I'm just ranting here. I hope you enjoyed the video. I don't know what I'm gonna call this, but happy Friday, y'all, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.